In this video, we're going to review blood typing and compatibility within the ABO and rhesus or RH systems. In order to fully understand this concept, we need to know a little bit about the immune system, so we're going to review that first. Every cell expresses on the cell surface molecules known as antigens, which we're going to abbreviate here as AG. An antigen is sort of like a molecular ID tag. In the case of the blood antigens, these are usually carbohydrates and proteins. Importantly, antigens are recognized by antibodies produced within the immune system. Antibody is going to be abbreviated here as AB. When an antibody recognizes an antigen on the surface of a cell, that cell is attacked and destroyed by the immune system. Let's talk about how these things are applied to blood typing and blood transfusion. Like all cells, red blood cells contain antigens on the cell surface. An individual's blood type is determined by the specific type of antigen that they express on their red blood cells, which itself is determined by the genes that they inherited. About 40% of the people in the United States express an antigen known as antigen A. These people have blood type A. About 10% of the population has inherited a different antigen known as antigen B. Those individuals have blood type B. A very small fraction of the population, about 4%, has inherited both antigens A and B. Those individuals have a very rare blood type known as AB. Interestingly, most people lack A and B antigens. Their blood type, the most common blood type, is O. This is the ABO system. If you've ever heard someone describe their blood type, you might recall that they additionally indicated whether their blood is positive or negative. With that additional qualifier, they're referring to antigens from another classification system known as the rhesus or RH system. The most clinically useful antigen within the RH system is antigen D, because more than 85% of the population has it. And importantly, the two classification systems are not mutually exclusive, so an individual can have antigens from both the ABO and the RH system. So as an example here, someone can express both antigen A and antigen D, and we would describe their blood type as A positive. An individual who has antigen B but lacks antigen D would be B negative. An individual with antigens A and B that lacked antigen D would be described as AB negative. And to address a common misconception, type O blood doesn't indicate that an individual lacks all blood antigens. It only tells us that they lack antigens A and B. Therefore, they can still express antigen D and have an O positive blood type. In fact, this is the most common blood type. Now, in order to understand blood transfusion compatibility, we have to return to thinking about the immune system component. Remember that an antibody recognizing an antigen leads to a cell getting destroyed. So we don't want our antibodies to recognize antigens on our own red blood cells or on the red blood cells being donated to us. Working off of a system of self versus non-self, our immune system produces antibodies against blood group antigens that would be foreign to ourselves. So an individual with blood type A, expressing antigen A, would produce antibodies against B. In other words, they would produce anti-B antibodies because B antigen is foreign to them. Similarly, a person with type B blood expressing antigen B would produce anti-A antibodies because antigen A is foreign to that individual. An individual with AB blood who has antigens A and B would lack antibodies against A and B. And lastly, an individual with blood type O who lacks antigens A and B would produce antibodies against A and B antigens. Now, since antibodies are located in the plasma fraction of the blood, they're typically removed prior to transfusion. Therefore, transfusion compatibility is determined by the antigens on the blood being donated and the antibodies that are produced by the recipient's immune system. So this means that an individual with A blood can receive blood from individuals with A or O blood, but not from someone expressing antigen B. An individual with B blood could receive blood from people with type B or O blood, but not from someone who expresses antigen A. An individual with AB blood could receive blood from people with A, B, AB, or type O blood. And lastly, an individual with type O blood could only receive blood from other individuals with type O blood. Transfusion compatibility is also determined by the rhesus system because the body can produce antibodies against antigen D in individuals that have negative blood types. However, these antibodies may not always be present unless an individual has had a prior exposure to that antigen. In these examples, this means that the individual with B negative blood may have anti-D antibodies, and the individual with AB negative blood may also have anti-D antibodies. Individuals with positive blood types will never have anti-D antibodies, since antigen D is a self-antigen for those people. Taking this into account, an individual with A positive blood could receive either Rh positive or Rh negative blood. But an individual with B negative blood would require blood from another Rh negative individual, in this case, someone who's B negative or O negative. Similarly, an individual with AB negative blood would also require blood from another Rh negative person, like A negative, B negative, AB negative, or O negative. And finally, the last individual here with O positive blood could receive either type O positive or O negative blood. For these reasons, within the ABO and Rh system, individuals with AB positive blood are often referred to as universal recipients due to their lack of antibodies, and individuals with O negative blood are often referred to as universal donors due to the lack of antigens on their red blood cells.